I can feel the hand of Satan as the tempter pressed me sore. He has been before my Father, asking leave to tempt me more. Though God slay me, yet I'll trust him. I shall then come forth as gold, for I know that he still liveth. I can feel him in my soul. I can hear the Father granted, saying, do not touch his life. Though you crush him, he'll not falter. He will rise above the strife. Though God slay me, yet I'll trust him. I shall then come forth as gold, for I know that he still liveth. I can feel him in my soul. When I have looked all around me, and his face I cannot see, then I know that through that lattice he beholdeth even me. Though God slay me, yet I'll trust him. I shall then come forth as gold, for I know that he still liveth. I can feel him in my soul. Now, this morning is not going to be a pleasant service. It's going to be very unpleasant because I have to dig down and get some blood and guts. This is something I've worked on for months and months, trying to curb it and head it off. And I'm going to have some very hard things to say. Very hard things to say. And some of you are going to be boiling mad at me, and that's fine. I've had nicer people madder than you are at me before. But I'm going to tell you the truth the best I know how. Because there's some things afoot, and they're being let go, and I have talked my head off. Individually, from the pulpit, I've done everything I know, short of what I'm going to do this morning. And this is the last sweep, and I brought out my sledgehammer and all the heavy charges I can get. Because I want you to know that there's some things that are seriously wrong, and they must be stopped now. And the root of it is in the mothers and daddies. I'll just tell you ahead of time. I'm going to have some hard things to say about children, but it roots back to mothers and daddies who are not doing their job. It roots heavily into rebellious wives who will not do what they're doing, and rebellious women raise rebellious children. Just an order of fact. You say, oh, good. Then your husband says, oh, well, good, it's my wife's fault. No, you're a slacker and a sluggard, or you do something about it. Every once in a while you hear some woman say, well, her husband needs to tell her. You ought to be present sometimes when her husband tries to share with her a bit of knowledge. And after she gets through chewing him out for doing it, you'll find out why he doesn't talk to her. Some of you wives, your husbands won't talk to you. Probably it's because you haven't listened in the past. Why should they think you suddenly changed? You say, ooh, this sounds dreadful. Well, you better crank up an excuse and leave her in a hurry. But even then, we'll still have the record of it. And of course, if you leave, you'll have to hear about it all secondhand. And I've got a TV set up over here. I'm sick and tired of adults telling other adults, your child did so-and-so, and they say, all right, I'll ask them. Well, they said they didn't do it. Or if the kid admits it, they say, well, darling, don't do that anymore. I've only told you 65 times in the last week, don't do this. Now, honey, don't do that. It's no wonder they're turning into monsters who have no respect for anything, including God's house. This is one of the reasons I'm coming down on it, because children are guilty of blasphemy. They're guilty of total disregard of authority. And I'm gonna put the scriptural britches on it. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to talk to God about it, because that's what he said. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. This one's coming forth just raw and bitter as it can be, because that's the way, when God gets tired of this stuff, that's what happens. Somebody was sitting there and saying, ooh, sure, I'm glad I don't have children. Well, you listen, because if you had some, they'd probably be just as bad. And somebody who's dreading it said, amen. I'm going to read you a bunch of scriptures so that you'll know I'm not just shooting with my guns empty out here. And I've only got a few of the scriptures. I don't have near all of them. I'm going to read a battery of scriptures, and then I'm going to tell you what I'm on the warpath about. But first, I want you to know that what's going on, what has been going on for months, is unscriptural and wicked and ungodly. And this old grouchy preacher is calling for cease, halt, stop. What part of stop do you not understand? Titus, the first chapter. I believe I've got it right there. Hope I didn't clip off the wrong one. Look down to the 5th verse. For this cause I left thee in Crete, that thou shouldst set in order the things that are wanting, and ordain elders in every city, as I had appointed thee. If any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. Did you look at that, ladies? One wife, and having children that are not accused of riot or unruly. I've seen some of your children do their riot and unruly stuff. I've also seen them defy and kick adults and other things. It's too bad they have any teeth left. There's a way to correct that, but some of you fiddle around and waited till they're grown up and think that that's their privilege, and now you're going to have a time to correct them, or else you're raising a zoo. A bishop must be blameless, steward of God, not self-willed, soon angry, given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre. I'm telling you, some of you kids who are acting wildly, you're destroying your father's credibility as a leader. Now, you fathers, you think it's all right to let them get away with murder? You go right ahead. And I'll guarantee you, people will have no respect for you as a spiritual leader. He said, well, I understand you had trouble with your kids. I did. But they never did defy me in public. They never did act up in public. And I almost quit the church one time because of it, and was informed the church wouldn't accept the resignation. Because I don't believe in this My children never sassed me. They never talked back to me. They wouldn't have any teeth. They didn't sass their mother. I didn't allow it. Well, I'm getting off my scriptures. I want you to have battery scriptures here. Isaiah 30. Isaiah 30, beginning with verse 9. This sermon might be titled, Surely How to Raise a Devilish Zoo. You just ignore the scriptures and do your own thing. Isaiah 30, verse 9. This is a rebellious people. Notice the next words. Lying children. Some parents, it never occurred to them that their children lie. And yet I and other people have caught them in lies. I believe in believing your children when you can, but I got news for you. There's some kids around here that are expert liars, and they'll lie to their parents, and they know their parents will believe them before they believe any adult that saw them do it. You better wake up. Lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord. If those children come up lying, I guarantee you they won't hear the word of the Lord, the law of the Lord. They say to seers, see not. To those that see them, they say, don't look. Those that see things. To prophets, don't prophesy to us right things. Speak unto us smooth things. Prophesy deceits. You say, well, that sounds like me. No, classify yourself. You're coming right under God's big guns. Get you out of the way. Turn aside out of the way. Cause the Holy One of Israel to cease before us. Cause God to withdraw his support. This kind of behavior. Wherefore thus saith the Holy One of Israel, because ye have despised this word, and you trust in oppression and perverseness, and stay thereon. Listen to this. If you let your kids get away with murder, here it is. Therefore this iniquity shall be to you a breach ready to fall, swelling out at a high wall, whose breaking cometh suddenly as an instant. You see some of those Mississippi levees give? Well, when they came loose, water flooded everything. You've got something coming like that if you are taking this kind of position. And he shall break it as the potter's vessel that's broken in pieces. Like an old piece of pottery that's been shattered into many pieces. He shall not spare, so that there shall not be found in the bursting of a shred to take fire from the hearth or to take water out of the pit. There's not enough pieces left to dip up something and carry food on it, nor to put water in it. It's all shattered to pieces. That's what's going to happen to those who do not listen to God. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, in returning and rest ye shall be saved, in quietness and confidence will be your strength, and ye would not. Isaiah chapter 3, beginning with verse 4, verses 4 and 5. And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them. And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient. And the base against the honorable. Did you notice that one I emphasized? I wanted you to get that. We've got children strutting around here who have no respect for the parents, and they certainly have no respect for any other adults they meet. I've had them turn their nose up at me, and I'm grabbing and say, don't you do that to me. Don't you dare. Of course, they're not as likely to do it to me as they are to others, and it's happened to many adults around here. Your children have been snotty, hateful, and disrespectful to adults, and that ought to get them a spanking. There are no adults around here trying to make trouble for bratty children. But I have asked repeatedly from the pulpit that children be nailed when they're misbehaving, because foolishness is bound up in the child, and the rod of correction will drive it far from him. But talking it over with him and say, oh, you didn't do it, darling, well, that mean old thing. And she's always talking back. He's always trying to cause trouble. I began to think there's something brain damage in the adults. That they cannot see that their children are turning into absolute monsters. Some of them have made the transformation. And the evidence is there. God places a very, very low value on children who have no respect for their elders. And if your children routinely are sassy to you, I'll guarantee you they're ugly to the adults around them. And if you taught your child, no matter what they say, honey, I'll believe you. No matter what your daddy says, I'm going to believe you. No matter what your mama tells you, I'm going to believe you. You. I can't put it in words in the pulpit what you are. You're the lowest scum on the bottom of the barrel if you do that. You do not love that child. I know of a child that was swinging on a doorknob, was told don't do it. Person turned their back, looked back, here he was swinging again. Told him don't do it. Went away, came back, swinging again, and this time broke it. Thrill. That child needed his hide taken off. People say, well, why don't the adults come and tell me? I wish they'd tell me. You know why they don't tell you? It's because you don't do anything, or you blow up and get mad at them. Because your child is a beast. And rather than admit the truth, you get mad at them. And you say, did you do that, darling? No. You need some lessons. And we've got a nice little, I'm sorry the movie's not too long up here. But we've got some clips to play from the workshop. Don't let me get on that yet. And I dare anybody to say, I didn't do it. We got you on film, hon. One little girl heard her parents discussing the film, and she came and told, Daddy, I did it. She's one that never gets in trouble. I've got my list of ringleaders. I'm going to read those in a little bit. Ringleading boys and girls, that their names come up repeatedly. Every time there's problems, every time there's anything going on, those names recur. Almost all of them are in everything. And they occur often enough that I'm going to call their names. I told you I was going to, and I'm going to. Stick around. You may have a place of honor. I'm tired of this. There is absolutely no excuse for it. And it's a horrible testimony to the world. Here at the church, it's a horrible testimony in the grocery store. It's a horrible testimony in the restaurant. Oh, don't get me on that yet. I'm not ready for that yet. I've got a section on everything. The wrecking crew coming to visit you. Well, let's read on. See if there's a little bit more in here about that. Psalm 89:32 says, verse 12, I'm sorry. Isaiah 3:12 says, as for my people, children are their oppressors. The kids tell them what to do. Don't you dare, I'll pitch a fit. I'll holler if you don't let me do it. I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it anyhow. Slip your arms into this little straitjacket, kid, while I beat the tar out of you. Well, I just call the police. Well, put you in a foster home for a while. Let you see what real abuse is all about. I'm telling you, this thing is serious. It's out of hand, and it's because the church people are not doing what God said. Well, my children, when they get with those others, well, they got to learn when they get with those others, don't do it anyhow. Friend, when I was growing up, I got with others, but I wouldn't dare take part. I did dare very few times. And my dad had the most uncanny way of finding out things. And he never took my word against an adult. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't have dared to lie to him when he asked me, did you do that? It was going to be bad enough if I admitted it. I didn't know whether I would make it past the funeral director if I had lied. I mean, that was the lie, that was the sin of sins. Don't you dare lie to me. It'll be much worse. But of course, I had parents who enforced those things. They didn't just threaten, they performed. I mean, it sounds to me like you had a bunch of child abuse at your house. I'll guarantee you I turned out to be a preacher, not a criminal. I'll guarantee you it lasted. When I went in the service at 18, I was the same fellow when I came out of the service 3 years later as I was when I went in. And it was because of that bedrock training. There were plenty of pulls to go and go over the hill. But every time I remembered, I had been taught different. You say, well, you're grown now. You can do as you please. I also remembered that I had been told over and over again, your mother would die of shame if ever this sort of thing happened. Your dad would be so ashamed of you. And that meant something to me. And it held me back from a lot of trash. Oh, we're doing well. We're only halfway through. And I've got lots of venom yet. Children are their oppressors and women rule over them. Slacker men. O my people, they who lead thee cause thee to err and destroy the way of their paths. Who's leading them? The children and the women. That's why they are erring and going astray. God did not place the leadership there. And if the woman is forced by her slacker husband to take the leadership, she's going to lead them in the ditch and she won't be able to help it. Then, Psalm 89:32, then will I visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. If you don't take care of it, God will. And I guarantee you, you won't roll your eyes and get out of it, kids, with God. He'll get your hide. You may flim-flam mom and daddy, but you're not going to flim-flam God. And many of you are old enough to be thinking about facing God. Because what you're doing is blasphemous. It's blasphemy to God. And by being that kind of a child, you can bring all kinds of hell on your home, on your parents, on yourself. And believe me, it's not pleasant when the judgment starts coming. Proverbs 10:13. In the lips of him that has understanding, wisdom is found. But a rod is for the back of him that is void of understanding. Well, see, preacher, that's why I talk to my children. Well, talk to them first and then whale the daylights out of them. Pretty soon you won't have to whale the daylights out of them, they'll quit. they'll find out it doesn't pay. Proverbs 13:24. He that spares the rod hates his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. In other words, he gives him thrashing every time he needs it. Well, I know the modern psychologists, what they say, they lie. I'll take the Bible's way every time. Proverbs 22:15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. If you let your child bamboozle you, you're as foolish as a child is. Allegedly, you were put in charge because you're an adult who's supposed to have more sense than the child does. But if you spend all your time yelling, screaming, and fussing instead of doing something and sticking to it, then you're foolish too. Proverbs 23:13, withhold not the correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with a rod, he'll not die. Now, that doesn't mean take something and bruise that kid, break the skin. Don't slap him on the head, my lands. You're liable to disjoint what little brain he's got. He got it from you, so you know he needs every bit he can get. So don't slap him around the head. You could seriously damage his hearing or something. He's got a part of his anatomy that has no bones to break. It has enough nerves to make it tender. And if you apply to the Board of Education, the seat of knowledge, not brutally, but enough to burn and burn and burn, you'll get results. And if that child rears up and said, I hate you, say, you haven't had enough, have you? Whop, whop. Give him some more. That's rebellion, that's stubbornness, and that's defiance. And if you let that demon, you say, well, it's demons. It sure is. And when we first got into deliverance, I knew we zeroed in on so many demonic things that were called driving children to do idiotic things. A lot of it they learned from their parents. They didn't have to be driven. They just watched mom and dad and did the same thing. But a lot of them were obviously demonically driven. And I went before the Lord and I said, Lord, it seems terrible to whip the child when it's the demon that's driving that child to do that. And the Lord said, there's no problem. That child has to grow up learning it cannot give in to every pressure from the demons, no matter how strong they are. That it costs more to do what the demons said. It gets their hide and it hurts worse to do what they say than to withhold. They've got to learn the pain of stopping and not obeying the demons. Otherwise they'll go through life, well, I couldn't help it. The devil made me do it. Baloney. You've got to rear up against that thing and learn to fight it. Just like you adults. If you give in to every demonic urge, you'll never get free either. You've got to learn to fight the pull of those things and the push of them and overcome them. And you can, well, you say, well, how can a child do that? Same way you do. They can learn to bind and loose. They're not too young. The great majority of them are born again. Some of them don't act like it, but they are. Proverbs 23:14, thou shalt beat him with a rod and deliver his soul from hell. That's one thing that has to be. That's the reason our schools are regular zoos these days. There is no discipline in the schools. Ask any of these teachers around here. They have to be very careful not to offend the little darlings. I'll tell you a correction for that. When I went off to school the first time, my daddy sat down and had a little talk with me. He said, now, son, your mother and daddy tell you what to do here, and you have to do it because we're adults. You're going to school. Your teacher will be an adult. And whatever she tells you to do, you do it. If you don't think it's right, you come and tell us later. But you better do what she says. Because if I have to go up to school or your mother has to go up to school because you've gotten into trouble with the teacher, The first thing that happens, when mother gets you home, she's going to thrash you good. And when I get home and find out about it, I'm going to whip you too. You know, my parents never had to go in. Not once. You say, well, that's strange. Listen, if you'd had my mother and daddy wielding the rod, you'd have corrected your behavior quickly. Much easier to do what the teacher said. But some of the other kids didn't do it. I know they didn't. Their parents had to run to school all the time, not mine. My parents never had to come to school. I kept my nose clean because I wanted my bottom not to burn. And I knew that my parents would take the teacher's word over mine. If the teacher said I did something and I said, no, I didn't. First place, I wouldn't have dared to say that. Because I knew my daddy would find out I'd lied. He'd look right straight at me with those blue eyes and say, are you lying? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll fix that. And he fixed it. He got it where I like to tell the truth, even though I didn't like to tell the truth. But I liked it better than what came when you lied. You've got to do that, people, if you love your children. Don't come up here with, I love my children. You don't love them at all. You hate them, you're lazy, because you won't make them mind. Well, it's so hard. That's right. Because they've been let go too long. It's going to take some retraining. Maybe you need a cage out in the back. Put bars over the garage. Say, okay, kids, get in here until you can act like humans. I'm not serious, of course. The neighbors would complain with all the noise as they tore down the garage. I'm telling you. Proverbs 29:15, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings his mother to shame. How about that, Mama? You let that kid go, and the next thing you know, other people are objecting. And then you get mad. Well, you sure are picky. That's right. I didn't intend to break these things. We've had them 15 years. So your brats came over and dumped them all out and broke them. Thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry. Thank you. That does a whole lot of good. Now let me tell you what's in those children that's causing them to do this sort of thing. And the others who are on the fringe line that are also piddling around. Stubbornness is in there. Disobedience and wicked disrespect to authority. Wicked disrespect to authority. And also because of all that, the disrespect reflected to the adults indicates there's blasphemy toward God. This is serious. They're laying the foundation to defying God in their lives. Parents, you better do something. Many of you have been talked to. I told you earlier, they say, why don't they come and tell me? Very simple reason. You won't do anything. You either get mad at them or you talk to the kid and the kid says, I didn't do it. I've known of cases where two adults said the same thing and the child told the parent they didn't do it and nothing happened. Boy, we're going to have roast preacher today for dinner. That doesn't matter to me. You'll choke on the bones. Be careful. It's a poor testimony. It's a poor testimony outside to the people coming in to visit. How many visitors do we have here on this woodshed thing? Too bad about you. If you can't take it, come back. It gets worse. We're just not going to hide it under the covers. Misbehaving in church is an abomination. It's bad enough at home. It's worse in God's house. Noise, pushing, scuffling, fighting, running to the restroom constantly is an excuse to get out of the room. Go to the public school and see if they run to the bathroom every 20 minutes or so. I had a classroom. Believe you me, they needed to go or they didn't get out. I put them through a rigmarole that they didn't come unless they had to go. Little boys came up to me and said, Mr. Worley, I got to go to the bathroom. Well, he'd already been out earlier. I felt he was one of those that was always jumping, trying to get out of class. These are sixth graders. I said, do you have to go real bad? Yeah. Real bad? Yeah. I said, well, stand here. I'm going to see how long it takes. Oh, Mr. Worley, Mr. Worley. Well, if he started dancing the jig, I'm going to let him go. But he knew he was going to have to go through that. And so he didn't come unless he was really in earnest. Running in the halls, running on the stairs, pushing and shoving down the stairs. Men work for days down here getting these floors polished. And some wicked kids, and they're Hagwish kids, got over there and with the heel marks of their shoes, marked those up in nothing flat. I would love to see them armed with toothbrushes and make them sit down there on their hands and knees and get those spots up with toothbrushes. Let it take several hours on their knees. Let them see if they could understand just how rotten that is to do that. You're not smart. You're acting stupid. I don't think there's an insane child in this church, but there are some who act that way at times. So what I'm talking about, I'm not calling your child crazy. I'm telling you what they're acting like and what other people see them. Other people see them as this. They play moronic, imbecilic, idiotic, airheaded games with the camera. Run around and making faces at the camera, waving at the camera. Do you know how silly you look when you... Of all the dumb things to do. You say, well, why are you making such a fuss about that? Because when the cameras are on, we have visitors. And they don't know that we don't have an asylum full of brain-damaged children. They don't know that you're normal children acting like you're brain-damaged. But it looks like it sometimes when you go around and see what's going on. Unfortunately, I hate to say this to everybody, but the majority of the kids don't get involved in this stuff. And there's some who never get involved. And I wonder why. Somebody's had some teaching different. You say, well, my child's special. They certainly are. They're especially troublesome. Everybody around them. They make faces on the camera so their friends can watch them on the monitor. Well, you friends that watch on the monitor and think it's so funny, and maybe some parents, you're about as airheaded as the kids. What do you think the visitors think of the bunch of kids running around here? This would be bad enough if it was visitors' kids. These are home folks. I think sometimes that the kids are trying to prove to the visitors that we have a bunch of brain damaged and retarded children here, which isn't true. We don't have any of that way as far as I know. There's not a child here that doesn't have brains enough to behave. Somehow they have not been taught to behave. They have not been required to behave. So they're acting like imbeciles, morons. Now don't you go away and say I called your child an imbecile or moron. I said they're acting like that. Is it possible they don't know right from wrong? Or have they missed some kind of training at home? They've heard it from the pulpit, don't do this. They have no respect for the pastor, because the pastor has strictly said, don't do this. But they know that mom and daddy are the ones that they have to deal with, and they don't really care. You say, well, I don't know what to do with mine. Make them sit on the bench by you for several Sundays. Just dare them to move. Take away their privileges to move around in the building, and after services, when prayer is going on, make them sit on the front benches up here over here on the stage. There's no excuse for children acting like, I don't want to do children that way. I'd rather they have freedom to move around a bit. But if they're going to act like animals, we're going to have to do something to put a stop to it. It's wrong, it's wicked, it's ungodly. You say, well, my child is hyperactive. Or bring their handcuffs and straitjacket then. Isn't that what you have to do with them at home? Oh, you let them run loose at home. No wonder they're wild at church. Friends, you're going to have to do something. They're yours. And the Bible has a program, but you've got to follow it. And hollering at them is not going to do it. Threatening is not going to do it. You're going to have action. And the action has to come every single time there's a step off the boat. And make them sit by you for a while, like little children, because they're acting like little children. And when they sit by you, by the way, make them behave. Some parents, they're oblivious to what their children are doing. I can't believe it. Their children are tearing things to pieces, and they don't even know what's going on. They're just sitting there, and everybody else around them is disturbed except the parent, and they're paying no attention. I guess I don't know whether your ears get damaged to the point where you don't hear. When I was a pastor, we used to go visit meetings, and we did. I was sitting with my wife and children. If my children moved, I knew it. I had 3 of them. And boy, they better not make noise. And they better not mark on songbooks, and they knew what they better not do. And they didn't do it. I'm not talking from inexperience. Kids can be made to mind, but you've got to be determined that they do it. They have a total disrespect of authority of any adults. There's some little corkers around here that have been, an adult said, honey, don't do that. And they went, like, well, you old fool. Who do you think you are? I don't have to mind my mom and dad. I certainly don't have to mind you. That's the look on their face. And they go prissing around. I've even had tell them to come here, and they ran the other way. That doesn't do any good, though, because I send a runner after them. You children had better mind adults. If I find out you're not, I'll call your name on Sunday morning. Boy or girl. I mean, if an adult stops you and asks you, don't do this, you stop it. If you think it's wrong, you come tell me about it. But you sure better get it straight. You better not kink it up and lie to me. That I won't tolerate. They have no respect for adults, the Lord's house, have no respect for the furnishings and fittings of the Lord's house, and they'll tear up things, scuff the floors. They feel totally free to ignore, make faces, and disregard any instruction or correction from older people. You can tell when the parents called in and is obviously afraid of the little Tasmanian devil they've reared, that this child hadn't had any discipline, because the parents is really afraid of the child. It's pathetic. One way you can tell they're afraid of them is because they agree with the child on everything. Well, now, honey, you shouldn't do that. My daddy never did say, honey, you shouldn't do that. He said, come with me. We're going to the correction room. And he said, I will teach you not ever to do that again. You know better than that. Didn't you know better than that? Yes, sir. That's what I thought. He wanted to be sure I wasn't, my brain hadn't departed. And as long as I was capable of knowing, then it was time for judgment, and it hit. All this is reflected in a complete disregard, sneering, hateful attitudes toward those who are in charge. They feel so superior, this is children, and are quite used to orally defying or even kicking and slapping adults who dare to oppose them. Some kids have kicked and slapped their mother because they corrected them. Lord have mercy. That child shouldn't have been able to sit down for a week. To emphasize the fact you don't lay hands on an adult like that. They were after the adult who dared to defy their tiny brains. These medieval monsters are easy to spot in public places like restaurants. The restaurant people hate to see them coming. Here comes the wrecking crew. Oh my Lord. If they're in a high chair, they sling food in every direction. I don't even like to sit at the table with them. You say, well, babies are just like that. They are not. Our grandson went everywhere with us when he was a baby and sat in a high chair. He never threw anything on the floor at all. He sat there and ate quietly and behaved himself. This is a bunch of foolishness. You've let the kids come up like a bunch of pigs around the trough. And I have to believe they act like that at home, and that's why you let them do it out at the restaurant. I tell you what, I don't like to sit, and then some of them are a little older, you know. They have more delightful things they do. The babies in the high chairs can crumble and spill, fling around everything they can get a hold of. And mother and daddy, oh honey, don't do that. And here comes the water across the table in your lap. How lovely, I'm so delighted to eat with these people. Never again. You wonder why people don't want to be around you? There's some older beasts that run around 7, 8 years of age and up. They've graduated from the high chair. They can pulverize more crackers, spill more condiments, and prowl in your plate if you'll let them. They will. They'll reach across into your plate, into your food. And you say, honey, don't do that. And maybe the parents say, oh, honey, don't do that. There's a better way to correct that. If you do that one more time, I'm going to put you in the car. And when we get home, I'm going to tear you up. Because what I'm going to do to you, they might call the health services in on me about. They like to pour pepper and sugar in other people's drinks. That's fun. Real fun. They take their straw and blow pop all over everybody. It's a delightful thing. What fun, fun, fun. And the parents are sitting there letting them do it. This is the worst thing of all. You'd expect kids to act idiotic at times, but you also expect the parents, and the parents just sitting there, blah, 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 blah. And finally the people at the table saying, honey, don't blow that on me. Honey, don't put your hand on my plate. Don't do that. Blah, 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 blah. And they're right back at it again. Doesn't curve them at all. Back talkers, stupid little hands violate your dishes and utensils, want to sample, fling and spoil. These baby Godzillas have all the dignity of a pig rooting at a trough in a pigsty. They have trouble at school. They're always in trouble. Children are allowed to make their own rules, grow up as undisciplined savages, and others whom others detest to see coming. I'll tell you, it's pitiful. You protest looking at mom and dad to slap the little beast away from the table. Instead, they either ignore the whole affair, gaze fondly on, as if you should be happy to have your meal spoiled by a snot-nosed brat who has no training. Some child parents don't notice anything is unusual is happening. Perhaps to live in a place where children of the rulers is normal to them. And they think all this pandemonium is normal. You wonder what kind of zoos the parents came from themselves. That's another thing, children. You get out and misbehave, and everybody's going to look and say, that little boy doesn't have a mother and daddy to train them. That little boy doesn't have a mother and daddy to train them. They're going to blame your mother and daddy for it. Of course, that doesn't matter if you don't care anything about them. But that's what they're going to think. They're going to think that your mother and daddy didn't give you any rearing. These parents are so used to letting the child run roughshod over every rule and every authority that such seems normal to them. To do so, to so violate God's chain of commandments doesn't bother the lackadaisical parent at all. They just let it go. If you note this ridiculous antisocial behavior, it's accepted as normal or met with an apologetic, no, darling, don't do that. No, honey, I told you, honey, don't do that. Please don't throw those mashed potatoes on him again. That's not nice. I thought, no, it isn't. I'm ready to go home. From long experience, the child knows this is a signal for defiance and putting on the stupid adult in their place. He repeats the ridiculous behavior with greater emphasis and defiance. And I don't have time to get to the demolishing crew. They come to visit you. I'll tell you what. I don't want a bunch of kids coming in and trashing my house. And children that have not been trained at home will come in and trash somebody's house. And you wonder why people don't invite you over? They may like the parents, but they can't stand the kids because they tear up the place. I'll tell you what. You better get awake and realize. Well, you say, well, if my children can't go, I can't go either. Well, that's good. You ought to stay home if you raised hellions like that. You ought to stay home and enjoy them. Let them tear your place down around your ears. Other people don't appreciate that. Other people don't fix their place up for your children to come in and trash and destroy it, run in, look in the refrigerator and all that kind of stuff. Lord, have mercy. Go in and ask, you got something to eat? Sit down. And they don't run all over the house seeing what all they can get into. When you enter somebody else's house, those children need to learn to behave themselves. Behave yourself. The Bible says David behaved himself wisely, and the Lord went with him. Now, I've stepped on all kinds of corns and toes and everything else. And after the invitation gets going, I'm going to have Dan turn this little monitor on. There's a short shot in there, and you'll see some of familiar faces in there. Just don't touch the TV. We'll play it without sound if you want to see it. You'll be able to do it. You say, well, I'm mad at you. Help yourself. You say, well, will you be mad forever? You have to forgive me because otherwise you're in trouble with God. See, I'm fighting from behind a safe shield. Whew, it's good to laugh, wasn't it? I'm sorry, people. I hate these kind of things. But I have 3 or 4 more on the back burner simmering. And I added a handful of jalapenos to the next one. This one is mild. There's more. We've got to do something if we're going to be the testimony we ought to be. What kind of testimony do you think it is in a restaurant when children come in and trash the place? Oh, good Lord, there comes that church bunch. Good testimony. They want to run right down to the church, don't they? They'd want to come down by curiosity and see if any of the church was left. People, take heed. Do something while you can. Don't let it run any further. It's time and past time. And when an adult tells you something, don't automatically think they're lying. You collar your children and make them tell you the truth a few times, you'll be surprised how many times they've lied to you already. They've learned if they lie, they get away with it. You're a fool if you let them get away with it. You say, well, supposing I were to punish them and they really were telling the truth. Well, that'd make up for one of those 1,001 times they didn't get it when they needed it. And you let them get away with it. They're going to be awfully careful if they know that you're going to take up slack. If you've never asked Jesus in your heart, you're probably wondering, where do you run to? Up behind me, it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in. If you've never asked Jesus in your heart, or you're not sure you have, then by all means, we encourage you to do that, to ask him to come in your heart and save you from your sins. Some of you boys and girls that I've called out, and others that you know that you were right on the fringe and I almost got you, and some of you are on camera, you better consider seriously just slipping down here, get down on your knees at this altar, and ask the Lord to forgive you for misbehaving in the house of God. It's not a light thing. Ask him to forgive you for disrespecting your parents, your pastor, the house of God. And when you get through, you go and apologize to your parents for all the times you've lied to them, all the times you've disregarded and disrespected them. You say, well, I'm not going to do that. Well, I didn't say you had to. I'm just saying, if I were you, I'd strongly consider it. Some of you need to get your slate cleaned, because if you don't, God's going to clean your slate for you. And when he does it, I'll guarantee you, it's going to hurt. You better get in gear now. If you're having problems about salvation, come up and say, I need to talk to somebody about salvation. If that's not your problem, but you're driven, you're harassed and tormented, and this is causing behavior that's going backwards from where you want to go, then you're having demon problems and they need to be cast out. But I'll tell you one thing, casting out demons is not going to correct your behavior problems. You're going to have to correct those, get rid of the demons and correct the problems. You're not automatically going to be better just because you get deliverance. And deliverance is, some of you are going to have to repent before you get into deliverance. Some of you kids are going to have to repent before the Lord and tell the Lord you're sorry, or he's just going to let those things stay in you. And the next thing you know, you'll be having bad dreams and you'll be having all kinds of problems because you chose not to do what God said to do. This is a deadline this Sunday morning. I'm warning you. If you're driven, harassed, and tormented, you need deliverance from evil spirits. These signs shall follow them that believe in my name, shall they cast out devils, speak with new tongues, lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. This is God's program. Jesus Christ died on the cross, rose in splendorous resurrection. He offers salvation in his name, deliverance in his name, healing in his name, and also he offers the working of the gifts in his name. Some of you adults may need to do the same thing children, I was talking to children about. You better get it straight if you're going to have God, if you're going to walk with God. That's the way it is. He said, well, I'm not coming back. Goodbye. Blessings on you. I'm just tired of it. Let's stand.